Crate digging, sampling, all of that shit is definitely my first love, and that explains why, after a while, after a couple of videos or so, I come back to it. So in this video, we're taking a Dutch R&B song that I just stumbled across while crate digging, and we're turning that into a beat reminiscent of the early sound of Black on his debut album, Free Black. Let's go. Crate digging is like a box of chocolate. You never know what you're gonna get. You either find a song that has been so popular in your heyday that when you sample it, you immediately earn all of those nostalgia points, or you find something relatively unknown to completely obscure, which you can turn into the most fire of beats. And what I found is something that to me was relatively unknown. I came across a Dutch R&B band called Just the Soul, and judging by their sound, they were heavily inspired. Well, I think that there's a lot of similarities between them and Drew Hill in terms of lyrics, in terms of sound, in terms of composition, production, and image. So I immediately fell in love with it. So that's when I decided to sample a particular song called Still Your Man. And in this video, we're gonna try and do this justice. All right, beautiful folks, welcome back into FL Studio. I'm gonna pull up machine right here, and I've got the Mark III setup right here, and I want to start off by playing y'all the part that I'm sampling processed so that YouTube doesn't copyright strike me, but here is the original thing that I sampled. So I listened to it extensively, I fell in love with it, and I thought to myself, I'm gonna try and chop this. And originally when I started chopping this, it wasn't the plan to turn this into a Black type beat, but that's just what it turned out into, once I got my chops in order, once I really started settling for a vibe of the beat. So yeah, let me just play you the chops that I am working with. I have to say though, looking at the sample, I stretched it, I reversed the hell out of it. Did I? I think I did actually. I reversed the hell out of it and I pitched it up a lot, so to the point where it's actually hard to recognize it from the original. So what you've been able to hear is that I've been able to turn this into this. And I attribute a lot to that to the fact that I've been slicing this baby manually, which allows me to make very carefully curated chops and just play around with them and then just edit them to my heart's content, and that's why I will always be partial. That's why I will always prefer slicing with a machine or with slicer instead of going for the Edison and taking those big chops and playing around with them. This is actually how I really like the sample. So with that being done, let's go and expand on that sample. Let's drag it into the playlist and see what we cooked up with that. Okay, so I might have gotten ahead of myself a little bit. There's still the processing that we need to break down. So the first thing that I do is Ozone 9's dynamics, of course, because I like to unleash a lot of multi-band compression just to tame the frequencies and add some compression to the frequencies. It allows me a good degree of control. What I do after that is I unleash Neutron Freeze EQ on it, and I pretty much make the same cuts that I made in the video where I sampled Door Number 1 by LSG. These are practically the same cuts that I use for, Bryson Tiller type beats and practically all the sampled R&B beats. I dress it up with choral. Wow, I don't know why my voice broke. And I dress it up with flare. Then I unleash a little bit of shaper box, and usually I go for the filter shaper I sometimes unleash the volume shaper, but for this one I went with just the filter shaper. And then, and this is something that I haven't done before, I unleash crystallizer on it. That's basically it for my processing. And of course, last but not least, I send it to a reverb bus. I do the same with the sample that I pitch down an entire octave. So I had 2 stacks of samples, and the first thing I did was not the chords, not the drums, it was actually the bass. Because the way that the samples were aligned, the way that it was building up, I thought I needed a very dark kind of bass, because that's what I mostly associate with the sound of Free Black. Dark, melancholic, depressed even, you know. So I decided to go into Omnisphere and take out a tried and true bass, a Reese bass, which is the Growler Moog bass, which sounds like this. But I wasn't done yet, because I didn't want that bass playing throughout the verses. I wanted to alternate it with a more, well, subtle and not so heavy bass. So I took out the Mini V, and I took out a patch that I like to customize a bass you'll use, which is a standard patch which comes with the Mini V. And I turned on the glide, and you know, especially if you listen to Never Know by Black, which is the first song off of Free Black, which is an amazing intro track, you'll actually hear that they're using a lot of glides in the bass. So I tried to do something similar with this particular bass pattern right here. There's something so mesmerizing about having these glides in your bass. I mean, I definitely get why drillers are so heavily, you know, it's a fundamental part of bass, but I get why there's so much emphasis on it, because it's so much untapped potential in having a bass that's actually doing its own things in terms of melody. It's amazing. So yeah, that's it for bass, and what we're gonna do now is break down the pad and the piano layers. So what you can see here is the piano V2 from the V collection by Arturia. This is the piano that I use to play a well, not a simple chord progression, but to play the chord progression with. And once I had that, I supplemented it with a patch in Cloud Supply, the Gretel patch in Cloud Supply, which allowed me to play these 2 cool layers right here. So if we look at the processing, in particular of the piano, I did a couple of things. I did a couple of EQ cuts, you know, cut out the lows, cut a little bit of the low mids. After that, I took out Portal by Output, because I did like the idea of having a granular synthesis effect on it. So these are the parameters that I use, nothing too special, of course. And then I used Shaper Box, and again, well, not again, but I took out the pan shaper and shaper box just to play around with that a little bit. The Gretel patch doesn't have a lot on it, actually. No, it doesn't have anything on it except for EQ, I think. So that's basically it. Now you might be wondering, how did I get this chord progression? Well, basically, I took the bass notes as a starting point, and that's where I started building minor 7 chords on, because I kind of assumed that it was a minor 7 chord. So what you can see here is that I'm working with an inverted A minor 7 chord right here. I'm playing it a large number of times actually before I go for an inverted F minor 7 chord right here, and I've got an F sharp major 7 chord right here, and that's basically just what I'm rocking with, and this F dominant 7 chord right here. So it took me about 3 minutes to figure it out, and that's when I got a dope chord progression. What you can actually see though right here, we're just skipping ahead a little bit, I actually have another pattern here where I'm switching to what is more like a 6-4-5 chord progression. Yeah, I think it's a 6-4-5 chord progression. That sounds a little bit like this. that also gave you a little bit of a preview of the drums, so let's just head into the drums immediately. Now, y'all know me as the guy to not sweat drums a lot, and this time is no exception. The only thing I genuinely put a lot of effort in is getting some proper hi-hat rolls and the drum selection. Now, I am a very big fan of this snare. I don't know if I have to visualize it. It really feels like it's a wide snare with a lot of smack. This snare smacks, and that's why I liked it. Now I feel that Prod by Jack's go-to kit has a number of kicks that I really like, round, subby, hard hitting. So I'm always partial to them when I'm making some hard hitting beats, and I think I got this from my Cash Money AP Shows the Screens kits by the Lunch 77, of course. So these are the rolls that I'm working with, and what I also did or haven't done already is not save it, but randomize the pad just a little bit, just to spread it out just a little bit. I really like that particular effect using the randomizer. So this is the drum beat, and if you add a couple of crashes to it, that's essentially the full beat that we are working with, and that sounds the same as in the preview, kind of like this. Now, there's a couple of closing notes, and I will say that beats like these are kind of hard to make actually, because if you just listen to the samples together, let me just play them again for y'all. Aside of what you may recognize as a heavily filtered out bass that goes dun, 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 there isn't really anything harmonic or melodic in it, so it may be hard to imagine a kind of a vibe or a feeling, even lyrics to this beat. And that's why it very much comes in handy to be able to lay down some chords and a bass line, because that's your starting point for any form of harmony that you want to add to the beat. And that's when you really can get your vibe going on. Now, on the particular subject of slides in your bass, I feel that we get away a lot with just playing simple root notes in the bass, but if you have a bass that is expressive in its own right, that complements your beat so much. So these are just techniques that you shouldn't be sleeping on if you're making these sampled R&B beats, because I genuinely feel that my sampled R&B beats have gotten better because of applying these principles. And you know, it's not as if the beat immediately speaks to me. When I was chopping this sample up, all I could hear was a vibe, like a dark vibe, like something victorious, even something resilient, something resistant, something pure defiance, you know. And that's when I made the link with Never Know by Free Black, because that's a song that exudes the same thing. So if you have something you can refer it to, something you can be inspired by, something you can base it off of, then making these kind of beats may become a lot easier. That's how I make most of my trap soul beats. I just cross-reference, you know, I listen to the trap soul album over and over to the point where I can dream the fucking thing. And that's why I know, that's how I know that I'm on course. That's how I know I'm on track. So, you know, use these notes when you're making these kind of R&B beats. And on that note, beautiful people, I want to thank y'all again for tuning into this video. I hope this video was educational. I hope this video was entertaining. I hope it was both, but I hope it was at least one of the two. And with that being said, I'm going to see y'all in the next video. And y'all be easy. Peace.